At military strategy meetings, she was usually relegated to the role of a mere observer, her striking looks often eclipsing her sharp mind. "Too delicate for operations," they'd whisper. Until that night, in the desolate Iraqi desert, when her unit found itself trapped in a minefield. The air was freezing, the darkness absolute. Radios were dead, hopes extinguished. At that moment, everyone's gaze turned to the woman they had labeled just for show. But she calmly reached not for her rifle, but for the ground. So, how did a fashion icon suddenly become a hero, guiding her unit through a minefield? And how did her silent movements become a march of salvation for her unit? This story will make you confront your prejudices. In the heart of Iraq's southern deserts, under the pale moonlight, the air was freezing. The U.S. Army's reconnaissance unit Alpha 7 was on a covert mission to observe enemy movements. Pitch-black darkness enveloped everything like a shroud, and the howling wind swept up grains of sand. Unit leader Captain Marcus Thorne meticulously scanned every inch of the terrain through his binoculars. Beside him were his experienced team, Staff Sergeant Jackson, an expert in land navigation, and Sergeant Ramirez, a communications specialist. In this harsh, unforgiving environment, there was often an ostracized figure within the team, Lieutenant Sarah Jensen. She was young, in her late 20s, with long, bright auburn hair and flawless skin. She looked as if she had stepped straight off a magazine cover, even in her military uniform. Due to her military-themed social media posts and popularity, she was often referred to as the Army's Too Pretty or the fashion icon in military circles. She was usually assigned the role of too delicate for operations or just an observer. Whispers about her never ceased in the barracks. Her hair would be ruined first if her unit got lost. She must have her makeup kit with her. Sarah heard these whispers and taunts, but always remained silent, returning to her assigned tasks. Her role here was only present in this mission as an observer. When Captain Thorne saw Sarah, he would usually offer a slight smile and say something like, "Lieutenant Jensen, I hope the desert wind doesn't ruin your hair," with a hint of mockery mixed with politeness. Sarah would just nod, smile faintly, and return to her duty. No one knew that she actually possessed a very ancient sensory ability passed down from her ancestors, especially useful in these mined terrains of Iraq. The ability to sense subtle changes in the vibrations of the sand or stone beneath the surface, revealing hidden dangers. This ability, which her grandfather had taught her when she was young, was called listening to the soul of the earth, a skill once used by her ancestors to find secret passages and water sources, now a forgotten heritage in the shadow of war. The mission began to complicate as midnight approached. GPS signals unexpectedly cut out, and radio communication was completely lost. Captain Thorne checked the maps, but the stars were also hidden behind the clouds. "We're lost," Staff Sergeant Jackson whispered, his voice filled with tension. "We don't know where we're going." Sergeant Ramirez tried to adjust the radio, but he could only get static. "No comms, sir. Completely cut off." Suddenly, a faint explosion was heard in the terrain ahead. The team froze. Captain Thorne's eyes widened. "Mine!" he yelled. "It's a minefield." The sound of the explosion had come from a distance, near the base of a rock. Likely an animal had triggered the trap, but it was enough to terrify the entire unit. Panic instantly made the cold air even heavier. Every step was taken on the thin line between life and death. No one knew where they were or what to do. Staff Sergeant Jackson, his voice trembling, shouted, "The maps didn't show a minefield in this area." Captain Thorne wiped the sweat from his forehead. Damn it, it might have been newly laid. The unit's courage shattered at that moment. The soldiers were pinned to the ground, filled with hesitation and fear. Each one was paralyzed by the thought that the next place they stepped could be the last moment of their lives. Sergeant Ramirez tried to adjust the radio again, but only heard a desperate crackle. Radios were dead, hopes extinguished. All eyes turned to Major Thorne, expecting a solution from him, but the Major's face, for the first time, looked so helpless. At that moment, in the absolute darkness and deadly silence of the desert, all prejudices against Lieutenant Sarah Jensen became a meaningless burden. Fear had descended upon the unit like a shroud. Captain Thorne yelled, "Nobody move! Stay where you are!" His voice tried to conceal his own desperation. Staff Sergeant Jackson meticulously scanned the ground, but he couldn't see anything in the darkness. "No path, sir. No tracks." Sergeant Ramirez had dropped his radio, now looking around in fear. At that moment, something unexpected happened. Sarah dropped the equipment list she was holding. She closed her eyes and slowly knelt down. She gently touched her fingers to the sandy ground. In the cold, sharp desert, she was listening to a whisper no one else could hear, the whisper of the earth. Captain Thorne was surprised when he saw Sarah. "Lieutenant Jensen, what are you doing? This isn't a place for posing," he exclaimed, his voice a mix of surprise and annoyance. Other soldiers also began to whisper, "What's she doing? Has she gone crazy? She'll step on a mine now for sure." Sarah ignored these whispers and taunts. At that moment, she was only sensing the secrets hidden beneath the ground. Her fingertips perceived the vibrations of the earth, the subtle changes in the resonance of sand and stone beneath. This was an ancestral ability her grandfather had taught her when she was young. Like hunters tracking animals, she was listening to the heartbeat of the earth. Every cell in her body was focused on detecting the faint abnormal vibration emitted by the mines. She had refined this ability for years, but had never been able to use it in her military career. A few minutes later, Sarah opened her eyes. On her face was an expression they had never seen before: certainty and absolute focus. She stood up and calmly turned to Captain Thorne. "I know the way, Major," she said, her voice clear even amidst the howling wind. Captain Thorne's eyes widened. "What are you talking about, Lieutenant? This is a minefield. How would you know?" The mocking expressions on the other soldiers' faces had turned to surprise and curiosity, but the certainty on Sarah's face was undeniable. At that moment, the fate of the entire unit was entrusted to the silent knowledge of this young woman whom they had underestimated for her beauty. Sarah took a step without hesitation. Captain Thorne yelled, "Lieutenant Jensen, stop!" But Sarah didn't listen. All eyes were on her every move. Her steps, with the precision of a ballerina, combined with the silence of a hunter. It was as if she was reading every millimeter of the ground, holding her foot suspended in the air for seconds before placing it down. Her facial expression reflected deep concentration and an internal map. She would sometimes gently touch the sand with her fingertips, and sometimes slowly check the texture of the soil. She could sense small hollows beneath the ground, the faint vibrations emitted by metal, and the slightest changes in sand density. This was her ancestral ability, listening to the breath of the earth, a skill once used by thirsty tribes to find water sources, now a skill saving a military unit from certain death in war. "Follow my tracks," Sarah said, her voice low but clear. "Step where I step. Never get surprised, never hesitate." Captain Thorne watched Sarah in astonishment. He had never imagined she could be so focused, so deadly. Staff Sergeant Jackson closely followed Sarah's every step, examining the ground with his own experienced eyes, but he couldn't see anything Sarah saw or felt. This is impossible," he whispered. Sarah slowly advanced through the minefield. The unit followed her, holding their breath. Every step was a victory. Sergeant Ramirez tried to reactivate the radio, but he still only got static. "No comm, sir, but we're moving." Sarah knew the location of every mine as if she had a map in her mind. Sometimes she would subtly shift to the right, sometimes curve to the left. It was as if she was dancing on an invisible carpet. As they passed over areas where other soldiers knew there were potential mines beneath, they trusted Sarah's determination. Every step was a shot taken, shattering prejudices. The cold wind whipped Sarah's face, but she was only focused on the whisper of the earth. Years of her training had been spent not just battling mannequins or targets, but all the harsh conditions of nature. This was the most important mission of her life, and she was doing it in front of everyone who had underestimated her as photogenic. When they reached the end of the minefield, an incredible wave of relief spread over the unit. The air, as if an invisible burden had been lifted, lightened. Captain Thorne, his voice trembling, whispered, "We're safe. Thank God we're safe." The soldiers collapsed to the ground, exhausted and astonished, but their eyes were fixed on Sarah. Staff Sergeant Jackson approached Sarah and silently shook her hand. "Lieutenant Jensen, I can't believe it. How did you do it?" Sarah's face showed more a sense of duty than fatigue. "I listened to the earth, Staff Sergeant," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "Just listened to the earth." What she had truly listened to was her years of overlooked talent, discipline, and determination beyond expectations. While everyone saw her as just a pretty face, she had trained herself to find paths to life even in the deadliest terrains. A few hours later, as the sun rose, rescue teams arrived in the area. Captain Thorne, with the first sound from the radio, reported, "Unit is safe. Unit is safe. We are out of the minefield." The leader of the rescue team asked over the radio, "How did this happen, Captain? That area was a newly laid minefield, declared impassable." Captain Thorne's eyes remained fixed on Sarah. "Lieutenant Jensen, she did it. She showed us the way. Our prejudices nearly cost us." In the post-operation analysis, Lieutenant Sarah Jensen's passage through the minefield was recorded as one of the most remarkable achievements in military history. Experts began to study her sensory perception method. In the Army, it wasn't Sarah's photogenic face that was being talked about, but her skill. The fashion icon label was replaced by a legendary title like Whisperer of the Earth. One of the generals stated, "Lieutenant Jensen, you are one of the greatest assets of the Army. We need talents like yours." A week later, Lieutenant Sarah Jensen was leading the new navigation and terrain training program at the military base. Among her students were some of the officers who had previously underestimated her. Now they all listened to her with rapt attention. Sarah taught them not just how to read maps or use GPS, but also how to feel the wind, listen to the Earth's vibrations, and most importantly, how to unravel the mystery of the terrain with an unprejudiced mind. Sometimes, Sarah said, the most important paths are found in front of people who would never trust you because of your appearance. And that moment is when not only the path, but all expectations are transcended. This story proves how deceptive appearances can be, and that the greatest courage can sometimes come from the most unexpected places. True heroes do not live in headlines, but in hearts, and in their silent actions. They are the ones who dare to see the truth in the mirror. Share your own story with us. Have you ever been judged by your appearance? Or witnessed someone rise when no one believed in them? Tell us your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters. Subscribe to Truth in the Mirror. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories and unexpected transformation moments. Hit the bell icon to be notified instantly of our new videos.